Welcome back to Barley and Hops. This is really a follow-up and more of an explanation about our process for the Pinot Grigio wine we made about 2 weeks ago. It's already finished fermenting, and all of my sediment is in the bottom of the ball, and I'll show you that on a close-up here in a second. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that ball. We're going to get rid of that yeast. Then we're going to replace the ball back on our fast ferment. I'm going to show you the technique that I use in order to do that. Then we're going to add our sulfite according to our instructions. Then we're going to add the potassium sorbate, which is also in our instructions. And then we're going to degas that, and I'll explain the degassing process. But these are the instructions that we're following, and it comes with the Cru Select for the Pinot Grigio wine that we made. Now, to degas this, it'll tell you to stir it vigorously for 5 minutes, and that works. And again, now let's talk about technique. I can stir this, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it the hard way, actually. I've got my paddle ready. I'll just spray with my star sand, and I'm going to stir that puppy for about 5 minutes. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to release all of the CO2 that's already resident inside the wine. You see, the byproduct of the yeast eating the sugar is, of course, the ethyl alcohol and the CO2 that it produces. And these CO2 molecules, they start to attach themselves to the other molecules that are inside that wine. So there's a really close bond that takes place, and it remains resident in there. What we want to do is we want to separate that because we want to give the wine an opportunity to clear. And with that CO2 that's attached to those molecules, a lot of that sediment that still stays inside the wine won't properly settle out. Plus, it all depends on your taste. With CO2 left in there to be a little spritzy. But there's another way to make spritzy wine. But we've got to degas this in order for it to settle properly and become a very, very clear, unique, beautiful wine. So that's what I offer you. That's the reason why we degas it. And really the degassing process is to improve its ability to clarify. And we want a clarified, clear, beautiful wine. So I'll use my paddle and I'll stir it and beat it without trying to introduce any oxygen, but I'll stir it for its requisite 5 minutes and try to release all that CO2 so it comes out. Remember, CO2 naturally wants to leave. And that's what happened. It's already gone. All the CO2 that the yeast has produced is gone. But there is still some that's resident. Again, those molecules that have attached themselves, and we just want to get rid of those. Now, one of the options that you have, this is called a whip. We carry these in the store. They're very inexpensive. And you could put this, one way of doing this, one technique, is that put this on a drill and put it in there and put the drill on high speed and then spin it. And that'll do the same thing. What you're doing is you're just agitating all of this wine so that all those CO2 molecules can be released and exit your wine. This is one method. Now, you buy these at your local brew shop. I would offer that you could also take an old spoon that you have, you can cut the end off and put that on a drill and do that. There are many different ways of doing this, and there's things around the house you could probably use. If you got a really nice piece of plastic, an old spoon somewhere that you can clean up, put that on a drill, put it in there, it'll do just fine. If not, then use the old paddle just like I'm going to do. So without further ado, what we're going to do now is I'm going to get this all set up, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to remove the ball, dump the yeast, replace the ball, explain that in a little bit more detail, and then we're going to go through the rest of the process. Now, if you'll notice, I've got this ball down here, and you can see here's the level of all the sediment that's settled into that ball. I'm going to turn the valve off, and then we're going to unscrew this collar. There we go. Now, just be careful because you're going to get a little bit of leakage. Just a little bit, though, and that's just the wine that's in between the two connections. Well, there we go. I've got it removed. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'll go dump it, clean it out, and we'll bring it back to replace it. So we'll be with you in just a moment. Well, here I am. I'm back with the clean ball, and I'm going to place this back on here, screw it up tight, but I'm not going to open up the valve yet because we need to discuss this. Okay, very good, very well. Okay, so here we are now. We've got the clean ball, which is empty because I still got the valve closed on the bottom of our fast ferment. And we've still got a little over 6 gallons of wine in here, or right at 6 gallons of wine. And before I do anything else, I want to explain something. Let's talk about headspace real quick. And it all depends. I don't advocate the idea of the reduced headspace. Wine doesn't care if there's headspace. Wine has no idea, it has no conscience. Wine doesn't care if it's in a plastic fast ferment, if it's in a plastic bucket, or if it's in a glass carboy. Wine has no conscience, so it really doesn't care. It makes no difference to the wine itself. The wine's going to do what the wine's going to do based on what you do to it, regardless of what container it's in. And remember that CO2, which is the byproduct of the yeast eating the sugar, is heavier than air, so you're always going to have a blanket of CO2 on top of the wine. Now, is introducing oxygen into the wine a bad thing? Well, definitely it is. Of course, in moderation, everything's okay, because that air will be displaced anyway, because there's still going to be some residual CO2 that you're going to move out of here. So what I'd offer to you is, there's a couple of different techniques when it comes to replacing the ball. It's your option. If you'd like, my goodness, I got that on there good. If you'd like, you can do a couple of different things, because people are concerned about the air that's in here going through the wine. You can siphon out a little bit of this and place it in the ball, and then put the ball back on the bottom, so that when you open up the valve, that there's no gurgle. You can also purchase, if you'd like, the same type of wine you've made, but I don't know, in my opinion, I think maybe you change the character just a little bit, but it's probably very, very minute. Pour that in there and place it on there, or you could actually do just water if you'd like to. Now here's what I have found though. I have found that during the clarifying process, since this plastic that the fast ferment's made of, and it's a food grade plastic, it is just slightly porous, and even on the inside, and that's not like glass, it's not real smooth. So some of the sediment that does fall through this kind of clings to the side just a little bit, which actually forces you at some point in time, if you see it, and it's easy to recognize, if you just look at it from the side, you'll be able to see a little bit of dark, cloudy patches. You just go in there and stir, and that'll settle out in the next couple of days. What I have found though, is I have found that if I allow the gurgle to take place, anything that's attached itself to the sides kind of naturally leaves. Look, I'm going to open the valve, let it gurgle. Just make sure you take the top off. At the very minimum, take the airlock out so it doesn't suck anything back in, because it's going to create a vacuum. You don't want to suck this water back into your wine. But I'm going to take the lid completely off. I'm going to allow that to suck in and let it gurgle. That'll remove everything from the sides. But heck, I'm getting ready to add my sulfite, my potassium sorbate, and stir it, so that's going to happen anyway. So, you know, I don't know. I look at it like 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I'm quite sure if you were making 300 or 400 gallons at a time, that headspace may have an effect. But folks, for the sake of argument, if you reduce the headspace and it works for you, please do it. If you do it like I do, and I'm not really that concerned with headspace, as long as I'm sealed, I'm fermenting, and then I'm clarifying. If that works for you, then that's fine too. So just remember, there's a bunch of different techniques. Now I'm going to remove the lid, because we're going to go to the next step. I'm going to open up my valve, and we're going to allow that ball to fill back up. There. Now all that air is moved up, and it's caused, I got a little bit of sud, so it's caused some of that CO2 to be released. Now we're going to add the yeast sulfite, which according to our instructions is sprinkle that in. And of course I always use my Star San. Shake, because it's a contact sanitizer. This is a wonderful product. And then you're supposed to stir it vigorously. So I'll stir this vigorously and get it all mixed up. I'm really happy with these things. All right, the next step, I'm just going to leave that in there, is our potassium sorbate. Now what we're doing is we're going to deactivate the yeast. And I think I talked about this before in one of the videos. We're not actually killing, people call it killing the yeast, putting it to sleep. We're really going to cocoon the yeast so that they no longer eat any residual sugars so that fermentation actually stops. That's what we're doing. We're stopping fermentation. And the purpose behind that is no matter what you do, there's always a little bit of residual sugars left over. It's just really, really difficult to get out of there. And we stir this vigorously also. And then when you put it in a bottle, if you don't do this and you put it in a bottle, you stand a pretty good chance of the stars, the moon, the sun, and everything, all the planets get all lined up, everything's perfect, and the little yeasts that you have in the bottle just kind of wake up and decide they're going to eat whatever they can find. They're going to produce CO2, and they'll blow the corks out of the bottle. It's kind of what happens. So you want to prevent that, and that's why you add that sulfite and the potassium sorbate. All right. Our next step is going to be to degas the wine, and I'll show you how I do that. Is I get it going. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to beat this wine so it moves, and I got to do this for 5 minutes. What will happen is you'll start to see a foam develop on the top. I'll do that while it develops, and then I'll just let it sit for a while, and that foam will go back down. All those bubbles will leave. That's CO2 released. And then I'll do it again, do it again. I'll do that for about 5 minutes, and that's degassing the wine. So for the next 5 minutes, I'll be degassing this wine, and I'll be right back. All right, well, you've caught me at the very end. I've just finished degassing. And what you'll notice, especially if you use the drill, you'll notice a lot of foam that'll come up. Just give it some time, stop, let that settle back down. It'll foam up a few times. The same thing with whipping it with, the paddle. It does the same thing. Look, now's the time for us to enter our clarifying agent. And so I've got my Keosol, which is in packet D1, and then I've got the Chitosan, which is in packet D2. So what the instructions tell us to do, I cut the end of that off, and I'll pour this in. Get all of that in there that I can, and then just stir that gently. Now you're supposed to give that about 1 minute, so we're going to wait the 1 minute, and then we're going to add our Chitosan, and at that point we're just about done. It's time to let this wine set again for another 14 days or so before we go into bottle. But you'll notice after that 14-day period that you will acquire a lot more sediment in the bottom of your ball. Because right now it's kind of hard to visualize it. You say, well, my wine's got to be clear, everything's settled. With this Chitosan and Keosol will settle the rest of that out. All right, I'm going to let that set there for about a minute, so we'll be right back. A minute's not a long time. So we're going to add our Chitosan, and we're going to do the same thing. And our instructions tell us at this point to stir vigorously. Now you'll notice this Chitosan is a little bit thicker than the Keosol. So I'll drop that pack. So I'm going to give it a good stir to get that all incorporated and mixed. And then when we're finished, God, I love these things. Makes brewing so much more easier. And we make beer out of these. We'll do a wash in these for our still. We make wine in them. And I've used this thing probably maybe 10 or 11 times. It doesn't stain. It's easy to clean. I just recommend that as soon as you finish using it, you clean it right away. It's just like anything else. If you maintain it, this thing is just universally wonderful. Okay. All right, we've got our valve. Our valve's been open the whole time. What we're going to do is we're going to place our lid back on here. And in about 14 days, we will be ready to take our final gravity reading just to check it. Remove our ball, put our other attachment on there, and sit in front of it. And for the sake of 20 minutes or so, I'm going to bottle 30 bottles of Pinot Grigio wine. Give us a call or check us out on the web. We'll see you later. Thanks.